Greetings to all of my listeners out there. This is the Lessons from the Cockpit podcast. I am your host, Mark Hasera, former Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Air Force and KC-135 pilot, flying all over the world, passing gas for a living. On the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we debrief some of the most fascinating pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and general aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We explore the tactics, techniques, and procedures these aviators created and cultivated during those extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even general aviation operations. More importantly, we listen to their stories and get their lessons learned from these experiences. The reason we do it is that so you, our listeners, have a greater understanding of how does the aviation world work and increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. Today's episode is brought to you by the book Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, found on Amazon in all four formats: hardback, softback, Kindle, and Audible. I mentioned to you over the last couple of weeks that I wanted to start a special series on a particular battle. Today, we're going to take a look at the Battle of Roberts Ridge during Operation Anaconda on the 4th of March in 2002. This was a 17-hour battle to go and recover Petty Officer Neal Roberts, who fell off of 160th SOAR MH-47 Chinook on top of Takur Ghar mountain. The helicopter he was flying in, Razor 3, got tagged by ground fire and fell off of the back ramp as the helicopter left the area, leaving him alone on top of the mountain. And in these next two episodes, we're going to talk to two pilots that were involved in the Battle of Roberts Ridge. Today, we are talking to Colonel Matt Neuenswander, call sign El Cid. He was the Ops Group Commander at Al Jaber Air Base, Kuwait, at the beginning of Operation Anaconda and actually flew missions down there. And we're going to talk to him today about his experiences during the Battle of Roberts Ridge. So, grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit show with Colonel Matt Neuenswander, El Cid. Colonel Neuenswander, El Cid, welcome to Lessons from the Cockpit show.
Glad to be here.
It's great to have you, man. You and I go back a ways. Vance Air Force Base.
Yeah,
Holy
it's been
smokes.
a while.
It's been a while, hasn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't you real quick just say, hey, this is kind of a snapshot of my career and where you went from Vance and what you did after that.
So I was a T-37 IP. I'm an Air Force Academy grad from 1980. I left Vance after flying the T-37 as a check pilot and class commander in 85, and I went to the A-10. I flew A-10s at England Air Force Base and the famous 74th Flying Tigers, which I ended up later taking into Afghanistan, of all things. So I went from, I did 3 years at England Air Force Base. I went to Suwon Air Base, Korea, I spent a year there almost. And when they decided to close it down and transition the aircraft, I spent 3 years at the Air Force Academy teaching history and being an AOC and flying the T-41 and back under the whole return to fly board deal.
Yeah.
I got returned to fly, which was the good news, and I got an F-16, which was what was available. I thought my life had ended, but it turned out to be a great thing. I went back to Korea, and I became the cast master at Kunsan in the 80th Fighter Squadron, the Headhunters, the Juvettes.
Yeah.
Great assignment, great way to learn how to fly the F-16. Went from there to Air Command and Staff College. Went from there to Moody Air Force Base in Valdosta, Georgia, and was the OSS, and then 2 years as the OPSO and the Werewolf, 69th Fighter Squadron. Number of desert deployments there, and then 2 years as commander of the 68th Fighter Squadron, the Lightning Lancers, outstanding fighter squadron, a couple combat deployments there. Both of those right after Desert Fox, so we were dropping a lot of bombs. Gave up command there right before that squadron closed and went to the SAMS Fellowship at Fort Leavenworth for War College and left there in June of 2001. The Air Force picked me to go back to the A-10 So I went to Al Jaber, which I had been at repeatedly in the F-16. It's the senior A-10 pilot in theater. And I'd been there for 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks when 9/11 happened.
So what were you doing on 9/11?
So on 9/11, I was preparing the Al Jaber. So there were only 11 of us there, permanent party. Everyone else was rotating through. And so I had a lot of jobs as the deputy. One of them was I was the chief of CVI or inspections. I was the provost marshal.
So you're a man of many hats.
Well, because you had to be.
Yeah.
Because we were an AEG, we weren't a wing, we were an Air Expeditionary Group. So the 332nd, which later became an Air Expeditionary Wing and moved up into Iraq, was a group at the time. So we had a support squadron and an OSS squadron and a civil engineering squadron, but we did not have and a maintenance squadron, but we had squadrons and not groups. So as a result of that, there were only like 11 of us on the group staff. Of the 11 on the group staff, only a few of us were permanent party, meaning we were on a 1-year remote.
Yeah.
So I had the entire EET team. I had to make one every rotation. Every 3 months, I had to create a new exercise evaluation team. And because it had started cooling off just a little bit, we were going to do a gas mask run because remember at the time, Iraq was still there and people were still worried about Iraq's chemical weapons. And so we were going to do what we call the bunker run early in the morning on the 12th. Remember, 9/11 happened for us at 4:00 in the afternoon. So I'm in this meeting with my newly formed exercise evaluation team. And the intel guy runs in and goes, hey, boss, it looks like an airplane just flew into one of the Twin Towers. Oh, no. It's like, really? Okay, we'll be done in 5 minutes here, and then we'll get it back up on the screen. Well, 3 minutes or 4 minutes later, before we were done, he runs back in and says, a second airplane has hit the towers, at which time I knew in my heart things were bad. Now, my boss, Dave Nichols, Colonel Nichols, and at the time I was a Colonel Select, but I hadn't pinned on yet, was at the embassy for the weekly embassy meeting. So everyone's there. So it's like, okay, fine. I got the whole team there. I basically get on my brick, my radio. I call all the squadron commanders over for a meeting. I set them all down. I said, I don't know what's going on, but here's what we're going to do. So you cops go to ThreatCon Delta, close the gates, don't let anybody in. And we basically executed the checklist for really bad things happening. By the time my boss found out what happened, and by the time the CFAC knew what happened, we were done because I just didn't fall off the turnip truck. That was my 6th combat deployment. And so it's like, okay, I mean, the worst thing we can do is overreact, right? We're not hurting anybody, but we don't know what's happening. We want to make sure, all the hogs were on alert. Here's what we had at Jabber. We had rescue helicopters, HC-130s, and at the time we had Vipers and Hogs. And the Hogs were already on CSAR alert. They were already on alert. I just changed their alert to 5 minutes because, again, we didn't know what was going to happen. So by the time Face starts coming back from the embassy, which was about a 45-minute drive away, I told him via code words what we had done. And he said, perfect. And then I called down to the KOC and said, we're at ThreatCon whatever, so that your tape isn't overclassified here. Yeah. They said, who told you to do that? And I said, we just decided to do it. You can back us down if you want, sir. And, 30 minutes later, we get a message to go to that level. And we said, we're already there.
Easier to obtain forgiveness than permission sometimes.
Well, it was my 7th tour in the CENTCOM AOR.
And it made sense.
Yeah.
Didn't it?
So that's where I was. So then for a couple of days, we tried to figure out, we had a bunch of reservists there. We tried to figure out what was going on, how we were going to get them back. It took us 4 or 5 days to get back in the rotation, and we started rotating guys out because at the time, the majority of the personnel during this particular AEF is, if that's what you want to call it, were reservists. So we had reserve helicopters, reserve HC-130s, reserve A-10s, active duty A-10s, but reserve F-16s. Yeah.
And they've all got real jobs back home.
Well, all of the reservists did. We had the 354th. They had not left yet. They were there from Tucson, so they were the ones that probably had the most flexibility.
Yeah. For the next couple of days, what do you guys do? Are you flying missions? Are you doing anything? Because the CFAC may not even have orders by that time to do anything, right?
So personally, what happened to me, and again, it was just because of my unique background. I was one of the few people in the Air Force that had been a CSAR pilot, a combat search and rescue pilot, in the A-10 and in the F-16.
Oh, and you're an IP in both airplanes too at this time, weren't you?
Well, I wasn't an IP again in the A-10, but I had been I had been everything you could be. Yeah. I had just come out of a senior officer requal. So I was a supervisor, but not an IP again. They basically checked me out as a 4-ship flight lead, which is pretty much all I needed to be at the time.
Okay.
But I was also checked out again as a Sandy 1 because that was one of the primary missions for the A-10 at that time to do this search and rescue. So I had been in theater for, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks. And what I had done was a very rapid, very intense checkout to get back up to there. And it happened that the 354 Squadron Commander, Tim Saffel Biggin, was a dear friend of mine from years ago, and he really took good care of me. So I got spun up again. I got checked out again. And then the next thing I know, I got a phone call. Can you come down to an undisclosed location and train the Navy to do CSAR? So I disappeared personally for about a week with one of my A-10 guys because the Navy, the Hornet guys, had never done CSAR, and it's a different mission when you're in a fast jet. So I took an A-10 weapons officer with me, and I went down, and we basically taught academics on combat search and rescue to a bunch of naval aviators down in Bahrain for a week. So that happened to me within 2 days because those guys were already on station, that they were the carrier group as they figured out what was happening. Then it became a matter of, moving munitions in theater and all that stuff. Then the next thing we know, within a week, we find out we're getting a Strike Eagle squadron on a base that is supposed to hold about 1,200 people. And now we are transitioning to almost 3,000 because they're adding additional F-16s, they're adding this, they're adding that, based on what's going to happen, different munitions people and all that stuff. And so my job became, after the CSAR thing, significantly administrative. And, we were bunking people in warehouses. And so as the deputy there, I was involved in the logistics of warfare.
And your population just doubled.
Well, not quite, but pretty close. We certainly got bigger by 35%.
Yeah. And so now you've got all these squadrons. They're getting ready. September 11th happens, and they start Enduring Freedom, if I remember right, starts on a Sunday, the 7th of October, correct? I mean, it's within a month that you guys are flying.
I believe that we flew our first mission on the 8th.
On the 8th?
Yeah. And I believe somebody dropped their first bomb on the 3rd, but not us.
Yeah. And tell everybody how long these flights are from Al Jaber down to Afghanistan and back.
So in an F-16 or a Strike Eagle, the average sortie duration was about, let's say, 10 and a half hours. So it took you 4 hours to get down there. And depending on your bomb load and how far north you were going, and keep in mind that much of the fight initially was at the very north end, the fight up north in Mazar Sharif was an hour and a half drive once you got into Afghanistan almost, because you drove the whole length of Afghanistan from south to north. Average, probably 10 and a half hours. If they just went in and dropped all their bombs at one time, because it was a target-rich environment and came right back out because there was nothing left to do and there was no cash for them to do, they might get out of there in 9. But in many cases, it was like fight, tank, fight, depending on if they had munitions available. The longest one was 17 and a half hours, and that was the Kabul Kabuki dance. That was actually the ACCA-3, General Slocum, Major General Slocum, when he was involved in going after some senior Al-Qaeda leaders. They had almost got feet wet back out to the Gulf when they got turned around. And myself and Colonel Nichols met those guys, almost pulled them out of the airplane when they got done. Phenomenal job.
17 hours?
Yeah.
In a Strike Eagle?
Yeah. Yes, Strike Eagle.
Gosh.
I believe the longest A-10 sortie was 13 hours, and the longest F-16 sortie was around 14 and a half hours.
That is a long time.
Well, it's a deployment sortie with a combat sortie in the middle.
Yeah. That's a great way to capture that.
Yeah.
A deployment sortie with a combat sortie in the middle.
Well, it's actually almost 2 deployment sorties, but really, when you think about it, I mean, many of us have flown for that many hours before, but it was droning. The longest that I had ever flown before was been in a cockpit for about 13 and a half hours with a waiver. And then at times when I was at Moody, one time they sent the guys and there were 16 and a half hours, I believe, flying directly to Kuwait because of the Operation Deny Christmas thing that Saddam Hussein was doing.
Yeah.
But generally, you would never be in a fighter for that long, almost 4 hours to get down there in an F-16 or a Strike Eagle, 1,400 miles.
And you had to coordinate all of your efforts, of course, with the Navy. I believe it was the Enterprise that was there. I mean, there may have been another one. I've met the Carrier Air Wing 8 planner for both the opening night of Enduring Freedom, and then he came back again on the Roosevelt for the opening night of Iraqi Freedom.
Wow. Busy guy.
Yeah, his name is Mongo. He's got an incredible story about having to fly these really long missions. They ended up flying opening of Iraqi Freedom because they couldn't go across Turkey. They were going from Alexandria, Egypt, down around the Sinai into Saudi Arabia. A tanker met them just going into Iraq. They had a 3-hour DCA vol and then turned around and came out. And it was about, and he said it was about 1,200 miles through this whole thing.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
As Anaconda is approaching, the CAOC didn't know what was going on. We knew that something big was happening. There was a colonel in Army Liaison Unit there that came into a meeting and he said, big Army's doing something. I don't know what it is, but it's named after a snake. And that's literally, El Cid, how we found out, well, what's going on? And they told us, oh, we won't need that much stuff. Okay, we're not going to need a lot of cast and so forth. So when did you find out about this whole Anaconda thing happening?
So it started on the 2nd. So the first time that I saw anything was probably, so the 2nd was Saturday. The first time I saw anything, it was, I don't know, Thursday, maybe Wednesday when the outboard came out. Martha McSally, who, you know, I mean, you can record this and say whatever you want, but, you know, people think ill of her or whatever, but she had tried to get the A-10s in the fight in October. And I had sent a guy named Duck Cowan down in October for the Rhino raid. So,
okay.
So anyway, so it starts on the 2nd. It's going badly. On the 3rd, I make the recommendation that we pull all the guys. Well, actually, on the 2nd, I make the recommendation that we stop flying in Iraq to the 3 and put all the Strike Eagle guys back in crew rest. And so on the 3rd, we give a pretty full up day of good stuff, but then we're planning for Anaconda. And when the soft guys kill everyone, all of our guys have to go home. When they kill when the ACs kill the soft guys, they do a global knock it off. And we had a whole bunch of Strike Eagles and Vipers up there that had to go home with their bombs on board.
Yep.
And what they asked for was 2 CAS caps. That's all they wanted. Now, they had Apaches. I've given the Anaconda briefing to SAS. I've given the Anaconda briefing to the School of Advanced Army Studies. Actually had to give the Anaconda briefing to the Vice Chief of Staff once upon a time. And I got to be in the meeting with General Hornberg and General Hagenbeck, which was not a pleasant meeting after the fact.
Really?
Yeah, I was in that meeting with Larry Stutchream, and I was in that meeting with Michael Longoria and Pete Donnelly and some of General Hagenbeck's staff. But ultimately, here's the issue. When you get the intel wrong, then you don't know what else is going to happen. General Hagenbach was basing his plan on the fact that there weren't that many bad guys in the valley. And when we attacked, they were going to run away. And what ended up happening is there were more bad guys in the valley, and they were the pipe hitting kind. And when the fighting started, they ran towards the sound of the guns. Now, fortunately, when we got into the fight, when they were running towards the sound of the guns, we had two guys basically fack a bunch of Hornets in and themselves, and they caught the major counterattack. They killed a whole bunch of bad guys in one of the things called the rat line. And I mean, that's validated in a number of different books and things. That was soup and canine. Ultimately, it was a decision made on bad intel. And after that, what do you say? You know, if you don't think that there's that many bad guys out there and you're wrong, the plan goes to where it shouldn't go.
Yeah, goes to hell quickly.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, we had major phases at Al Jaber way before Anaconda. There was the fight in the north, you know, and the retreat from Mazar-i-Sharif, which we were very involved in, and facking and blowing up guys, Taliban that were retreating from up north down back towards Kandahar. And then our FAC-As were significantly involved in the capture of Kandahar Airport and the town, in support of the Marines in the vicinity of Rhino. And then as they moved north towards Bagram, they were involved there. And then the last big shooting part that we were involved in was Tora Bora in December. And frankly, pretty much everyone thought it was over. Yeah. We hadn't dropped a bomb in Afghanistan since mid-December when Anaconda happened. We basically had this pause, if you will. The only bomb that I'm really aware of that we dropped between mid-December and March was we blew up a C-130 that had crash landed in the mountains.
I remember that.
And so we sent Strike Eagles out to blow it up so it couldn't be exploited.
I remember that.
But that was the only bombs that we dropped for, you know, that, think about it. That's
on one of our own airplanes.
And February, we didn't drop anything. So for 2 months. So people are like, hey, can we go home? The war's over.
Yeah.
And we had transitioned out the majority of the guys that had dropped all the bombs. And the Navy is taking a Steel Beach Day at the beginning of Anaconda. Yes. You know, the Bonhomme Richard is heading home. So people think it's over when we get into this hornet's nest.
Chief of the MAP was a colonel from Washington, D.C., a Viper guy by the name of Tuna Johnson.
I know who he is. Yep.
I just reconnected with him not too long ago. And he called it a battle rhythm change. He goes, we got to get ready for this battle rhythm change. And he had asked me if we have a close air support CAP, Combat Air Patrol, in the middle of Afghanistan, Sluggo, what's the gas bill? And so that was the science project I had just completed when that Army colonel said during a battlefield coordination detachment meeting, there's something big, something happening soon, and it's named after a snake. And we're all like going, okay, whatever. And you're right, because even Alexander the Great knows you don't fight in Afghanistan during the winter.
Well, you know, a lot of people don't realize that Kandahar, Ish Kandahar, is actually named after Alexander the Great. That's where that name comes from.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
I did not know that.
So go read the Afghan campaign by Pressfield. So you'll enjoy that.
I'll put that book in the show notes so that everybody can get a look at it. Okay.
So one of the other little historical quips, I haven't really talked about what my job is right now. Mm-hmm. But I'm still an Air Force civilian. So I'm the senior Air Force doctrine liaison to the Army. And ever since I retired as a colonel, I have been working for the LeMay Center, the Air Force LeMay Center. So I'm involved in those publications that the Air Force is the senior leader for, which is air defense, airspace control, command and control of air, air interdiction, some of those things. So one of the little vignettes in Joint Pub 352, airspace control, talks about how on the 1st of March, remember Anaconda starts on the 2nd of March.
Yeah.
On the 1st of March, we gave back airspace to Afghanistan.
Oh,
We reopened airways
I remember
from
that.
Kabul to basically the center of Pakistan, because every time an aircraft flew over the top of Pakistan, they got money from the airlines.
Yeah.
And so during the whole war, they closed the airspace down over Afghanistan. Well, then because of Anaconda, that two of those air raids were right over the Shah-i-Kot, and that's where the B-52 orbit was
Hanging out.
And so they reopened them on the 1st and had to close them on the 3rd with ICAO, which is a big deal because they, the Airspace Control Authority, being the CFAC, had worked for weeks in order to reopen those. And then they had to close them because we were dropping bombs through them.
And it was like millions of dollars that they were going to get for opening those things up too.
Basically, it's about $800 every time an aircraft flies over the country, but it's free money, and it's legal free money. And yeah, when people don't have to fly around Afghanistan anymore, it does save a lot of money for them.
And you know what, El Cid, now I remember that too, because we had to position the air refueling anchor areas amongst those airways. And I remember,
yeah, you can go look at because I put the little vignette in Joint Pub 352, which says, hey, here's how airspace planning can affect your combat operations. Yeah. And there's a picture of that in there.
We had two that were kind of south and west, and then we had one that was north and west.
Yeah.
We had Rush and O'Reilly were the names of them that were southwest of Shah-i-Kot Valley, and Hannity was up to the northwest. And just to be fair, we put two more right against the Afghan-Iran border. And we called them Hillary and Kennedy because they were on the far left side of the country.
Well, there you go. Well, I wasn't aware of those because I never got to refuel over, because I thought all I was going to do was Viper and Strike Eagle planning. And the Viper guys always appreciated the fact that I was a Viper squadron commander, even though I was flying A-10s at the time, because they knew, okay, he knows what he's talking about. I mean, I'd go look at their film and go, nah, you missed. This is why you missed. And they'd go, how do you know that? You're a hog guy, to start with. And then they found out when I was a Block 40 squadron commander, they'd go, oh, we get it now. So anyway, at the beginning of that fight for 2 days, I didn't have any idea whatsoever that I would be going forward. So at the end of the first night or the second night, Sunday night, I'm back in my room, getting in my shower after, I don't know, an 18-hour day when my bat phone goes off and they say, get back over here. And that was the last time I went to sleep for, other than maybe nodding on the C-130 for a couple of days.
Your unit is getting tasked now to send A-10s forward.
So the 74th had just shown up. They had replaced one of the one of the reserve units. And actually, I thought I was taking the Maryland reserves. The Maryland Guard, the Maryland A-10 Guard. I thought I was taking them forward in October. But when it didn't happen, I put all of their hard work in a briefcase. They left, and it was under my desk at work.
Oh, what a stroke of genius.
Yeah, well, in case we ever needed to go, who knew? So we had basically created what you would call a deployment checklist. This is all the routes and everything. Because like I previously said, this was like a deployment sortie with a combat sortie in the middle. So when I got a call from Admiral Nichols Sunday night, and I went over and got on the bat phone with him, he said, we need you to plan basically to provide at least 2 hours station time from, take a 6-ship in, turned out to be a 5-ship later, but a 6-ship in, and we need you to give like 6 hours of station time. 2 ships. If you can make it 12 hours so we can get you enough tankers, that's the way we'll do it. And I go, where are we flying out of? And he goes, I don't know, you tell me. So he said, here's your 4 options. Well, none of the options, Manas was too far away. K2 was way too far away. The only conceivable option, if we couldn't fly out of Bagram, which is where the soft guys were, but the runway was trashed. The runway wasn't long enough for A-10 operations at that altitude, was Jacobabad. We could do it out of Seeb, but they were going to be terribly long sorties, and you weren't going to get the station time you wanted. there were really no other options that were presented to us. I suggested maybe Posny, but no. So when I launched Soup and Canine out, I had no idea where they were going to land, to include if they were going to go in and help the guys get off Roberts Ridge and then come home. No idea. Those guys launched out at about 9 in the morning, 8:30 or 9 in the morning. And at 1, I found out that I was going to get to go Jacobabad.
A personal trip to Jacobabad.
Yeah. So one of the things I had to do, I said, okay, fine. When's my airlift coming? And they said, well, maybe Wednesday, because we have tanker priority, but we don't have priority over the airlift. And I go, well, that's not going to work. I mean, my guys are going to land down there after one sortie, and then, maybe they'll turn them. But if they end up dropping their bombs or whatever, what then? And they said, well, we don't know what to tell you. We'll call you back if we have airlift. And I said, okay, I have a plan already. If you go in the Wayback Machine to about 1996, and I was at Moody as the chief of weapons and tactics under Colonel Welsh, who later became the chief of staff. I was the only guy on base, for whatever reason, who'd been an IP in the F-16 and the A-10 at the time. So he put me in as the chief of weapons and training in the OSS, the newly formed OSS. So I go in there, and we had slick C-130s, F-16s, 2 squadrons, and A-10s. But he said, we're fixing to get the H-860s from Patrick and the HC-130s from Patrick, and we're losing the HC-130s. I'm sorry, the C-130s.
Mm-hmm.
So for about 2 months, I had to learn about C-130s, but then I had to learn about HC-130s to take the mission planning cell through an ORI. And I learned that you could take that big tank out of the back. Yeah. And if you actually had to move stuff on it, you could put a winch in the front and winch ammo trailers on. And so I suggested to Larry Stutzream, the A3, that he go to Joe Mosley and allow me to take an HC-130 off of CSAR alert in Iraq, take the tank out of it, let me send guys to Ali Salim, which was 20 miles away, to get seats and a winch, and I'd be airborne in 3 hours. And they said, if you think you can do it, do it. And we were airborne in 3 hours. So the lesson I learned there was, I had a 20-minute meeting with a bunch of guys and picked an advon and said, go back to your hooches and pack your stuff. And it's crazy. They said, remember anthrax and all the stuff was going on there in Cipro? The doc walks up to me and says, here's your suitcase. You have to take these 2-PAM chlorides and auto injectors and Cipro down for all your people. And it's like, okay, you're on the team. I'm not carrying all that stuff. Go pack your stuff.
Yeah.
So I just added a med tech. Or actually, it was a flight surgeon that went down with me to Jacobabad. Which, funny side story, at Jacobabad, they had a unit of the 101st Airborne. And I heard through my flight doc that one of the kids got bit by a cobra there.
Oh.
And so our doc helped save this kid's life who got bit by a cobra down there. But
my gosh. Doctrine never stops, does it? No.
So anyway, we took the group down there to Jacobabad, and we were there for, I was there for 11 days. And at the end of that, Anaconda was over, and we flew out of there. I will say probably, if you want another lesson, apparently Joe Mosley was able to call a classmate from War College from Pakistan and say, hey, no kidding, I got to send A-10s in there. Because it's really hard to tell people that you're sending A-10s in for humanitarian purposes.
Yeah.
Particularly with the shark's teeth.
Yeah. And that big gun out the nose.
Yeah. And the bombs and everything. But that's how we got in there. But as soon as our soldiers departed the Shah-i-Kot, we were told, get out of there. And it was a big deal. And we get out of there in a hurry.
And that's when you guys went to Seeb?
So I flew back out of there to, via Seeb back to Bagram. And I had 2 days to replan. The AOC brought Navy guys and Marine guys in to try to do a Anaconda AAR. Yeah. And they did that up at Al Jaber, but I wasn't there for the whole thing because I was planning, I was packing, I was doing all that stuff. It was a huge challenge to forward deploy from a forward deployed location.
Yeah.
So here we are at Al Jaber. So we don't have mosquito netting because we don't have mosquitoes. You know, we don't have leishmaniasis. We don't have many of the things that they had to deal with in Pakistan. You know, I sent my supply guy down. There was an REI in Kuwait City, and we about bought those people out of stuff. Because, you know, many of the things that we had to pack in order to take, they told me I could take 96 people. And that was my initial contingent that I was able to take into Bagram. Now, there were already firemen, ATC, a few ASOC personnel there, and a few TALC personnel there. About 30 airmen were already there. But they were there, you know, supporting generally the soft stuff that had been operating. So AFSOC was already there. Okay. But AFSOC was not, in essence, running the base. And so I was sent in there to set up an AEG, build a fire department, build maintenance, build all the stuff that the Air Force does. And oh, by the way, take 30 cops in and take over the airbase, defend the airbase.
All while you're flying combat missions at the same time.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's why we do what we do.
Yeah. You're launching A-10s out of Jacobabad while all this is going on at the same time.
So this was Bagram. I went back from Jacobabad to Al Jaber for 2 days. Got a big old, you know, Cadillac bin, start filling it full of supplies. Fortunately for me, I had done very austere deployments before. I had deployed to Honduras. I had deployed checkered flag to Turkey. I had done some of those austere things. So it's like, okay, I need this many 20-gallon trash cans. Sir, why do you need trash cans? For laundry. Well, who's going to do your laundry? Us. You know, I need trash cans. I need detergent. I need all that stuff. And for the first month we were there, we washed all of our clothes. There was no laundry service.
In trash cans.
Yeah. I bought clothesline. We had clothespins. They're going, how did you know this? Well, because I had done it before.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, you know, all of our airmen at Al Jaber didn't have M16s, you know, so I had to basically take an armory with me and one side of a Cadillac bin, and people checked weapons in and out because the guys that were out there on maintenance had weapons with them.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
And see, this is all the stuff that goes into creating a base. All right.
Yeah.
I recently had on a gal that opened Karshi-Kanabad, K2. And she talked about old Russian base, no infrastructure. And she's actually taking a shower with one of her guys next to her. And they're talking about what's going on. They have one of those big army blankets between them.
Yeah.
And she says, hey, pass me the soap, you know, and he drops the soap over the top and everything. And people don't think about that kind of stuff, you know?
Well, I billeted men and women in the same tents with one of the things that I had in my Cadillac bin was 50 plastic shower curtains.
That you bought an REI?
I don't know. At the Kuwaiti equivalent of Walmart. You know, but basically they were cheap shower curtains. But, you know, I asked the women, I lined up all the women and I asked them, do you want to be in a women's tent or do you want to live with the men you work with? And 100% of them said, we want to live with the men we work with because we will feel safe then.
Now, isn't that fascinating?
We want to be in the other end of the tent with the people we trust, as opposed to putting a bunch of women that don't work together in the same tent.
Isn't that fascinating?
And I got a little pushback from some people later on that, but I got no pushback from any of the women. And I had women in my tent.
You got no pushback from the people out doing the job.
Correct.
So let's go back to Jacobabad just real quick, okay?
Okay.
Soup and Canine fly this long mission, like you said, deploy, fight, and they finally find out they're going to land at Jacobabad.
After they escort the helicopters to Bagram, then they fly the hour and whatever. I think they had to hit a tanker.
Yeah, they did. I didn't know about the helicopter thing, though.
Well, they got there in time they escorted the helicopters that picked up the guys from Roberts Ridge back to Bagram. That's what they got there in time to do that night.
Okay. And they landed Jacobabad. What time did you get there?
I got there. Well, so remember, it's a really odd time change thing.
The half-hour thing, yeah.
Well, not only that, but so it was like a 4-hour flight. No, it was more than that.
It's about 5.
It was a 5-hour flight and a 1:30 to get there, plus 3 hours. So we took off maybe at 4 in the afternoon or whatever. We got there about 2 in the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning.
So when did
and they were already there? They had been there about an hour and a half, and we're already in bed.
And to all my listeners, think of the overlap of this, okay? Soup and Canine land there, and there's like nobody to catch them, right?
Well, so some guys parked them.
Did they?
There happened to be some guys, interestingly enough. When I was at Moody, the 71st Rescue Squadron was there, the AC-130s. They were there at Jacobabad. So the 71st from Moody was there. And so the 70th had been at Moody, and some of those maintenance guys had switched over when the 70th left. So bottom line is there were a few A-10 smart maintenance guys in the HC-130 unit, and they put those airplanes to bed. And they could gas them up.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't have the thing to reload the bombs. They didn't have any of that stuff. That was all on my airplane. So as soon as we got there, we turned the aircraft. We went out and made sure the bombs and all that stuff. Now, they hadn't really expended. I don't think they had expended anything on that first thing. They expended a bunch the next day, which would have been the 5th.
And so they're loading up all this stuff. And if I remember right, Soup and Canine don't get like their full crew rest. They're called.
I had to go wake them up.
So tell me that story.
Well, so we basically get in. We think we're going to get some sleep, maybe finally, because I haven't really had any. Because I didn't sleep. Well, I was up all day Sunday. So this is actually now Tuesday morning in Jacobabad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. In Jacobabad.
Yeah.
And so we got in there about 2. I think we went to midnight chow because we hadn't anything to eat. We were going to go lay down. The next thing we know, we're getting the guys are running over and grabbing us because they think they had a high value target. So I think Soup and Canine may have got 6 hours, maybe 7. And we just went and woke them up, launched them back out.
And I can't remember all the things that they did on that mission, but it was crazy.
Well, that's the mission where they caught the big counterattack coming in.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So that's the mission because the previous day and that day, I tried to write a Silver Star for both of them on that, and I got downgraded because we couldn't prove that they were getting shot at. Now, we could prove the previous day that the F-16s and Strike Eagles were shot at during the
Roberts Ridge
opening stages of Roberts Ridge, but we couldn't ever prove that those guys were being shot at. So DFC was as good as you get. And none of the guys that I wrote during the time period got DFCs with Valor. Nobody was doing that then.
Yeah.
That's an OIF, the DFC with V on it.
Yep.
I mean, I wrote a bunch of DFCs. No one ever said, hey, put a V on that thing. They were just DFCs at the time.
Your A-10 folks are, and like Soup wins like 3 in a couple days.
Well, also Soup wins 3, Pop-Tart wins 2, Arden wins 3. Yeah. So, I mean, I could call up if you want it. If you send me an email, I'll send it to you. I think we got 17 DFCs in 11 days.
Wow.
I'll send you the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, I will. And that's the kind of thing that a lot of people have not heard about. What the A-10s were bringing to this fight and the things that they were doing, calling in the close air support. And Chris Russell talked about they're using that new thermobaric bomb on the Strike Eagles. and they've never shot a gun at a ground target. Now you've got, the Hogs down there doing just incredible work. I mean, it's just an awesome airplane.
One of the big problems that I had, though, is I had to build a bomb dump, and I didn't. So remember, airlift was one of my primary problems. So what I told my pilots was, I don't want you dropping bombs. I can reload your bullets, but you're up there to FAC. Mm-hmm. So if you got someone else's bombs you can put on target, put their bombs on target first. Now, if it's danger close or it's the mother of all targets or whatever, use your best judgment. But I would prefer you use other people's bombs, because I am now moving bombs after Soup and K9 crushed that counterattack. Yeah. I'm moving bombs between airplanes so everyone has some bombs on board, because I haven't got resupplied yet.
And explain to everybody here what building a bomb dump entails, because we had to build one at Jeddah during Desert Storm for the B-52s.
Well, the first thing you have to do is haul very heavy things in the back of a transport. So, the small bombs weigh 500 pounds. Now we have 250 pounds, but the small bombs weigh 500 pounds. The big bombs weigh 2,000 pounds. And there's all sorts of rules for flying them. You can only fly them with this or that or whatever it would be. But the bottom line is, I needed 3 C-130s full of bombs in order to have a couple of days worth of full up bombs, which is why, like on one of the sorties I was involved in, we're emptying B-52s of their bombs, but we're not dropping our bombs because we're saving our bombs for that surgical stuff that close air support pilots do. So we emptied off. One night I flew with Captain Kneep, and we emptied off everyone up there, but we didn't drop because we were FACing.
Okay.
I think she shot some rockets, some marking rockets, but we didn't drop any of our bombs. We're saving them for the stuff that A-10s are good at, the danger close. Because we had plenty of bombs up there. But a B-52 with no targeting pod, it doesn't know where to drop if somebody doesn't tell it where to drop.
From reading that Osprey book on A-10s, there's bombs coming off of all the different airplanes. B-52s are carrying a lot. F-18s are carrying a lot. 14s are carrying, and that was just amazing.
Yeah.
When you guys get to Jacobabad, how long are the Hog missions? How long are the A-10 missions when you're flying out of Jacobabad?
So they were long. In my case, for one thing, they switched us to night for political reasons. So on the 6th, I took off at sunset and landed at sunrise. So I don't know, 8.5, 9 hours.
Oh, yeah. So tell us about your mission then in flying the Hog from all of this. What were you doing during your mission?
Because I had predominantly focused on the leadership aspect of setting up the detachment and all that stuff. So when we were first at Al Jaber, and the squadron commander was new, so Arden Dahl asked me, he said, so are you going to lead this first sortie? Because I had been in theater for months. And I said, Arden, you're the squadron commander. I've been a squadron commander. I've led my guys in combat. That's your job. My job is to go set you up for success. My job is to go set up the logistics, the infrastructure, all that stuff that doesn't exist right now at Jacobabad that we take for granted here at Al Jaber. So I'm stealing stuff from everyone. I'm stealing radios. I'm stealing phones, building up my little Cadillac bin of stuff that I have to take down there, because as soon as I get down there, now I've got to be able to plug into ZipperNet, download an air tasking order, download all the other stuff for maintenance, get all the crypto, all the stuff people don't think about in order to run a combat operation. So I said, you take care of the flying aspect, I'll take care of that. So I did not fly personally until the 4th, 5th, 6th. So I flew the night of the 6th. So I finally, personally, the morning of the 6th, I took 2 sleeping pills and went to sleep for 7 hours and woke up and flew all night. So the other thing that I had established was I didn't want people flying who, if you were one of the first ones in, then you were one of the lucky ones, but everyone else had to fly on the wing first before they led. So I flew on Captain Kniep's wing, and we flew a very long sortie all night long. And she did a phenomenal job. She won a Distinguished Flying Cross that night. And we had about 17 airplanes up there that night, Strike Eagles, B-52s, F-16s, and we facked them all in and dumped all their bombs on the bad guys while we were flying a significant portion of it high perch off of an AC-130 looking at their burn in our NVGs.
Yeah. Okay. So explain to people, since I know what that is.
So the old AC-130s had this big IR light that they could put down on the ground. And if you were wearing NVGs, you could look down and see this IR. It was like someone had shined a big flashlight on the ground. And so you could look down there and see where the JTACs, the Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, were lasing the target areas and where the bad guy mortars and all that stuff were.
Yeah.
And then so Pop-Tart, that was her call sign, was doing the close-in control, and I was controlling the B-52s, having those guys come in and come out. They were dropping bombs predominantly on a big geographic feature called the Whale, because that's where a lot of the bad guy mortars were. They would come in and dump their whole bomb load on the Whale as we coordinated all that stuff. So
that was a very prominent piece of real estate too.
Yep. So that's what we did. We flew in there, we facked, we went out and tanked, we flew in there and facked, we went out and tanked, we flew back in there and facked, and then we flew back. So I think we flew about, 8.5, 9 hours.
And did you expend any weapons during that time, or did you shoot the gun at all, or are you just serious? All you're doing is directing traffic.
Well, no, we're not directing traffic, and we're dumping all, bomb after bomb after bomb of all the other people that are in there. So we're controlling
chaos.
And Pop-Tart was the one providing the clearance, and I was basically playing what's called TAC A, Tactical Air Controller. So I was clearing people into and out of the kill box and deconflicting predators and
See, a lot of people don't understand. Like the Predator's going slow, the Strike Eagle's going fast. Strike Eagle's burning a lot of gas because they're carrying, 9 GBU-12s. There's a lot of moving parts in what you're doing.
Yeah.
A lot of.
And the Strike Eagles were attacking east and west, and the bombers were attacking predominantly north to south. So you'd have to build a hole every time so someone wasn't flying through someone else's bombs.
And that's something that I know a lot of people don't understand when you're doing this.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to watch when you are, like I said, we were watching from the KAOC, getting a picture from Boss Man, I think was the AWACS call sign. And it was just amazing stuff to watch. Incredible.
Captain Kniep did an outstanding job.
Oh, yeah. Well, brother, we've been talking for an hour and a half. I appreciate you coming on, man. This is great stuff. Okay. And I am not going to decrease your productivity any longer, but
okay.
Hey, Matt, Colonel Neuenswander, LSID, folks, thank you for coming on, because I'll be honest with you, he is one of the Air Force's experts on all things close air support, and everybody knew that. And I appreciate you spending time with me tonight. Okay, brother?
Hey, anytime, man.
All right, thanks. In the show notes below, I'm going to put links to a paper that was written after the fact. LSID mentioned he was in a room with the Army. That discussion did not go well. The Air Force was getting a lot of flack for not supporting the Army and operations during Anaconda. LSID mentioned that we didn't see the air tasking order and the fragmentary order until 5 days prior. We really had to scramble for this, and I'm going to talk about that in my episode. I want to thank LSID for being on. He truly is an Air Force close air support expert. Everybody would go to him. We appreciate the book Tanker Pilot for sponsoring this episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. Also in the show notes, we're going to put Wall Pilot and the links to A-10s that you can buy, 4-foot, 6-foot, and 8-foot prints that you can peel off and stick to your walls of the A-10 and Colonel Neuenswander's Lancer flagship when he was flying F-16s out of Moody. We also have that drawn. On our next show, we're going to talk to Soup Campbell, which El Cid mentioned. He ends up flying down with a lieutenant colonel on his wing. He's the hog driver that has 3 distinguished flying crosses along with his squadron commander. So Soup will be episode number 2 of the 4th of March, 2002 on Operation Anaconda and the Battle of Roberts Ridge. Please stick through this 6-part series because this is going to be incredible. I've already done an episode and published it with Colonel Chris Spliff Russell, the F-15E Wizzo, in a previous episode, which will also be in the show notes below. Again, folks, thanks for joining us on the Lessons from the Cockpit show, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week. I publish about every Thursday, so hope you'll tune in and listen once again. Please download this episode and share it with your friends and family. Previous episodes can be found on my website, markassera.com, under the podcast pull-down box. Talk to you next week.